The numbers are in. The 2019 Gulf of Mexico hypoxic zone, or dead zone, an area of low oxygen that can kill fish and marine life near the bottom of the sea, measures 6,952 square miles. This is the 8th largest dead zone in the Gulf since mapping of the zone began in 1985. It begins innocently enough. Farmers use fertilizers to increase the output of their crops so that we can have more food on our tables and more food to sell to the rest of the world. But it is this agricultural runoff combined with urban runoff that brings excessive amounts of nutrients into waterways that feed the Mississippi River and starts a chain of events in the Gulf that turns deadly. These nutrients fuel large algal blooms that then sink, decompose, and deplete the water of oxygen. This is hypoxia. When oxygen in the water is so low, it can no longer sustain marine life in bottom or near bottom waters. Literally, a dead zone. When the water reaches this hypoxic state, fish and shrimp leave the area, and anything that can't escape, like crabs, worms, and clams, die. So the very fertilizers that are helping our crops are disrupting the food chain and devastating our food sources in the ocean when applied in excess. If the amount of fertilizer, sewage, and urban runoff dumping into the Gulf isn't reduced, the dead zone will continue to wreak havoc on the ecosystem and threaten some of the most productive fisheries in the world.
During our year in Iowa, we attended our 1-acre farm the way a typical farmer might tend 1,000 acres, with tractors, fertilizers, and chemical sprays. When we grew our corn, we had injected our acre with 130 pounds of fertilizer, giving us the promise of a huge yield by giving our corn easy access to nitrogen. But not everything we had sprayed stayed on the farm.
The runoff from our old farm eventually enters the Iowa River, which parallels the Raccoon River across much of the state. Together, they drain more than 5 million acres. The Des Moines drinking water plant only treats a small portion of the water that flows by its doors. So the vast majority of Iowa's nitrates continue on to the Mississippi.
We followed the nitrates in the river, which in peak season reach almost 8 million pounds a day, to the Gulf of Mexico, and a part of the coastline called the Dead Zone.
What affects the Gulf of Mexico is the dissolved nutrients, the dissolved organic nitrogen and the nitrate and the phosphate. And what's happened in the Gulf of Mexico is that the amount of nutrients has increased to the point that the algae are growing more than they did historically. So you end up with a deficit of oxygen on the bottom. And that's what happens in the Gulf. If there's not enough oxygen, a fish can't live.
Yeah, that's probably why we ain't catching good shrimp no more, because of the dead zone. When you pull through it, the fish and the shrimp are all dead in it. We working for nothing.
In communities along the Gulf Coast, bringing in an abundant catch of shrimp is as important culturally and economically as a 200-bushel corn harvest is in the Midwest. Delegations of shrimp fishermen have begun traveling to Iowa to meet with farmers and encourage them to use less fertilizer.
What we're trying to say to the farmers is, we got to find out a way that we can both survive. You're passing down your environmental problem down to me.